I would like to propose to start so that we respect everyone who's on time here. And I will share my screen. So I hope everybody sees my screen. So may I welcome you all today. My name is Jan de Vis, and it's an honor for me to host this session today. Today we celebrate Otto Laske, and Otto is a very special colleague, scientist and artist. As a colleague, he knows better than anyone how to make you think with questions that matter. He does this in a very modest way. And as a scientist, he has achieved a unique integration to understand the functioning of people, from which developmental perspective they create sense and meaning. He's also an exceptionally talented and innovative artist who seamlessly integrates music, poetry, and the visual arts, and where he is equally groundbreaking as in his scientific work. On his musical site, you can download a lot of his music for free. But today we honor Otto for his scientific work, and we are here with colleagues from more than 30 countries who subscribed. And for the session today to run smoothly, I ask you all to put your speakers on mute, and questions can be put in the chat box and will be answered with pleasure by all the speakers. On the agenda today, our agenda today is straightforward. 15 colleagues will share some of their experiences with the person who made it his quest to develop a new paradigm for coaching individuals, process facilitation, and managing human resources. And they will share their experiences with their perspectives, frameworks, and tools that Otto shares in his classes. Each has chosen one quote from Otto's very rich work that made a personal difference. And in this way, we hope to give participants who are less familiar with Otto's work a taste of his insights. And after the testimonials, we will reflect together about the future of CDF. Now, what is CDF? And it's very difficult to describe this in a nutshell, but the testimonials we will hear are organized along the essential framework Otto developed, the Constructive Developmental Framework, abbreviated as CDF. In CDF, Otto brings together two main strands of adult development, the social-emotional strand and the cognitive strand, together with psychological insight into what he refers to as individuals' need-press profile. The notion that human beings are unceasingly under development and remain so until the end of their life is key to his work. The social-emotional dimension refers to how people internally position themselves towards others and themselves over the lifespan, and thus make meaning. The cognitive dimension, which is about the fluidity of thinking, helps you to discover how people can think beyond formal logic, using what he calls dialectical thought forms that expand the use of logical ones. And he calls that making sense. The psychological profile approach creates insights in where individuals are confronted with loss of energy and what is an individual's cost of doing the work he does and where does he or she suffers most. So the core of Otto's work is to develop qualitative dialogue and thus paving the way to a different kind of process consultation. Humble inquiry is the starting point to serve others, to understand clients in depth relative to themselves, as coaches, mentors, consultants, teachers, and professionals generally, even including politicians. Otto has written 2 reference works, which will probably still be consulted 40 years from here and form the basis for his teachings and classes. But I have talked too much now. Let me invite our first colleague, Nat Phillips, to share the first testimonial. Nat, it's up to you.
Well, thank you, Jan, and it's a real pleasure to honor Otto, who had a major impact on my work and has informed really everything I do in terms of coaching. So I've chosen this quote, which is CDF is based on the constructivist paradigm, following by research in adult development over the lifespan since Piaget. The paradigm says that coaches and their clients alike construct reality according to their present developmental level. As a consequence, human behavior appears as an epiphenomenon of the presently held development level. So doing follows being, and this is very, very true. So I have chosen an analogy to illustrate the constructivist view or the constructivist paradigm. And you have here a picture of basketball players. So when you show this picture to young kids and you tell them, what do you see? And they will tell you there are a blue team and a yellow team playing basketball. So if you ask a basketball player, what do you see? And they will be able to recognize the game plan. They will tell you something like it's a 2-4 game plan, and the person with the ball has to make a decision. So if you ask fans of this team, what do you see? Then they will be able to put it in context and tell you what was the score, what happens next, how important this meeting was for the team. So if you ask a psychologist, he will tell you that the person holding the ball will have to make a difficult decision between listening to his coach, who seems to be screaming, waiting for his teammate. So whether he's going to be a good teammate and pass the ball, or whether he's going to be egoistic and try to shoot the ball himself. So the more mature you are, the more your eyes will be trained and the more stuff you will see. And the problem we have in the workplace today is that people operate at the level of, oh, 2 people are wearing yellow and 2 people are wearing blue, and they are playing basketball. And this is what we need to change. Mm-hmm. That's it, Jan.
Wow, that's a wonderful introduction. Thank you, Nat. Rainer informed me that it could be that he's 1 or 2 minutes late. Rainer, are you there? Rainer? Well, I think he's waiting.
I'm there.
You're here?
Hello.
Okay, Rainer, it's up to you.
I'm in the train that will be leaving soon, and I hope the signal holds. That's not a challenge. Okay.
4 minutes,
yeah.
Rainer.
Yes, I have been meeting Otto quite a bit less than 20 years ago, and it has really changed my life in many things. But I want to speak on this quote here, which was kind of for me like a revolution that put the world from the upside into upside down, kind of like downside up, like it should be. And once we distinguish between the social, emotional, and cognitive development and separate this from psychological issues, we move a step closer toward understanding how human experiences of the real world come about. I used to work in something as interesting as leadership development in a context multifaceted like the European institutions. And when I come to understand about adult development on the one hand, this was like turning kind of the world around all these linear approaches that were assuming humans are all equal, kind of, they just fell away. And the second was, once I stepped a bit deeper into the understanding of adult development, then it also became clear that even there the world is still flat, and that people see adult development in phases, so and to compete with the conductor. So we see that the development itself is not just one line of development or one broad brush understanding of worldviews and ego states that change.
There is some background noise.
Now I can speak. Yeah, that's the train here. Sorry. Now the loudspeaker is done. So the thing I came to see, and what really struck me, is to understand that we really understand development if we distinguish between how people think and take this a bit away from how they are. So the being, of course, includes thinking, but the thinking itself can be so much better observed and gives precision on how to actually speak and deal with them and understand their understanding. So one is how people develop their options and how they construct their world. And the other is kind of what for them means the world, like how do they act in the world. And this was such a big deepening of how we really are. I can only say the quote is what it says. It feels like I have become much more real in the way how I understand that I can now work with leaders. What has come up is that I was introducing a research project with a number of partners in Europe, and we got funding from Erasmus Plus to really help the sector of adult teaching or adult learning to be informed by this. And this makes me proud that I can share this tonight. The project will actually start at the end of the year. So right to the 20th anniversary, we will have much more development now around where people in the world begin to understand. We need to understand how we develop over time. We need to understand how we think. And the distinction between the two made me understand that how can we really measure where someone is in their thinking and in their being. How can we bring this together? The thing is, first separating it creates a big problem. How do we bring it back together? Because it is together in the person, and the psychological issues are also still playing a role. So the real work of coaching and training and developing, and then can use all the three dimensions and distinguish them in seeing what's the dominant one right here, right now. What I found for coaching is that the cognitive coaching is actually helping to really help people, whereas just understand their being kind of lets us be in awe and wonder, but we can't really help them develop. So in that sense, it has become very practical for me how I can coach with people in leadership positions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rainer, and you already made a nice bridge towards the last part of this session later on the future of CDF. Perhaps we can come back to that one in about a small hour. Social emotional development is basically one of the pillars of Otto's work, and well, essence is that human emotions, they are a social product and they differ from society to society, and therefore they are also a product of culture. But in spite of the many differences between cultures, there is one thing that they have in common, and that is that they follow stages of development. Recognize through speech, evaluate through interviews, and give feedback in writing or in conversation. And adults unconsciously position themselves emotionally according to 5 stages, indicating an increasingly more mature view of themselves. And their developmental trajectory is characterized by an alternative focus on the self and on others. It reaches from an instrumentalist adult who uses others as his or her instrument to, at the other side, self-aware adults who no longer defines themselves by origin, education, profession, social rank, but simply be a human being. Mustafa, can I give you the first testimonial here? Shaker? Hello? Are you there? It seems Shaker did not yet connect to the setting. Perhaps I can jump to the next colleague, Alan.
Yes, thank you, Jan. I'm Alan Snow. He has 4 minutes. When I drifted into coaching from consulting, after several years, I realized that I was not getting to the meat of what I was trying to do, that conventional executive coaching was not doing what I thought coaching would be or was capable of. I trained at, I beg your pardon? I trained at quite a few coaching schools. I learned their stuff, I practiced it, I went out and tested it in the field, and on reflection I decided it wasn't doing the trick. I eventually went to Sydney University and did a coaching psychology master's degree, and that was a big step forward, quite a big shift. At last it was evidence-based that I could totally rely on, thorough research, but it still didn't do what I thought coaching was about. There were plenty of people following the herd, but I wasn't one of them. And one day, in amongst our references from Tony Grant, I saw a reference to this guy, Otto Laske, who I'd never heard of. And we'd never been taught his stuff, but it was listed in the bibliography. So I got a hold of that book, and I tell you, the scales fell away from my eyes, if you like. This was a revelation, and it gave me the key that I'd always bumped up against in coaching, is when my one size didn't fit all, I was at a bit of a loss. I didn't quite know what to do. I'd read Keegan, I'd read probably every book written on coaching up to that stage. I read Otto's book, and suddenly the lights went on. Suddenly I could see this distinction between social emotional and cognitive sense-making. Social emotional is meaning-making. It's the unceasing activity of our minds that interpret our lives and work. And it's unconscious. It's a hidden dimension. That's the subtle part of Otto's work, is that what I was doing was I was going in and I was coaching from day one, minute one, hour one. With Otto, you go in, I'm not teaching it now, but I'm telling you what happened to me. You go in for a totally different experience. There's no coaching for the first 3 sessions. There's session 1 is social emotional assessment, session 2, cognitive development session, and session 3, the feedback and the discussion of that. And then is when you decide whether you're going to coach this person, and they've had the opportunity to decide whether they want to be coached by you. But the essential factor is you've been able to match what's going on in the unconscious, because the first session, session 1, day 1, hour or 2, first one, is getting to that hidden dimension. And what Otto did was he removed note-taking from it. There's recording going on. What you then did was you analyzed and assessed the transcript for the various stages of adult development stages, and the 16 stages and sub-stages and intermediate stages that there are, that most researchers have agreed on. Voila! What more could you ask for? You can then see whether you're coaching someone who's at a level below you. That's fine. If they're a level below you, somebody else is going to talk to that later on in our agenda. But this was a complete revelation for me. I've since become very interested in cognitive assessment and cognitive coaching and all of that field. But this was the entree, the way in. And this was the thing that gave me something to talk about and compare about to other people. And I couldn't work out why it wasn't on their radar. It was an idea whose time had come. But unfortunately, for most of the coaching world, it's only come 10 to 15 years later, which is startling, but I'm glad it's here now. So people are doing that, but we are the only group which have another perspective on what they're doing. And I can't say I agree really with what other people are doing in the realm of adult cognitive development. For example, back in the day, I had done the subject-object interview with Lisa Lay and Robert Keegan, Immunity to Change. I'd worked with Jennifer Garvey-Berger, and in fact acknowledged me in her first book, even though I was only a student of hers. And all of that stuff was so interesting, but it just wasn't gelling. I wished I'd had Otto's book when I did the SOI, because he deals with it in there, and it's brilliant. All this work's brilliant. I can only tell you that not just my coaching insights and my coaching life and my coaching enthusiasm has changed, my whole outlook on life has changed, because this stuff doesn't just apply to coaching. It applies to everything. It applies to consulting process work, critical facilitation, every kind of psychotherapy there is, counseling, and to everyday life. It even applies to life coaching, and one day they'll come around to accept that the person, let's say, for example, I know metaphors are dangerous, but the person that I married is not the person I'm with now. It's the same physical person, but they have changed and moved, and they've graduated through these stages that Jan was referring to, from stage 2 to stage 3 to stage 4. Only about less than 10% get to stage 5. And that's all I need to say. It's this wonderful framework. That's what was lacking from all the others, was a framework that's accessible, that can be comparable, and that can be matched. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. If any questions come to your mind, don't hesitate then to put them in the chat box. At this moment, I want to check whether Shaker Mustafa has joined. Shaker, are you there?
Yes, good morning. Very, very good morning. I'm here from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia.
Well, it's up to you now.
Okay. Thank you for introducing me. I'm sorry for a bit late, because I know in Malaysia it's about 12:30 in the morning. So
wow. We really appreciate that you're here and that you joined today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And secondly, I would like to say thank you very much to you all, especially Otto Laske, for inviting me here to be here tonight. So I would say good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all now. All right. Is this my turn now, Jan?
It's up to you. You have 3 minutes left.
Okay. Thank you. I would like to tell you the benefit. How did I come to know about Otto Laske? Yes, I came to know when I was in ICF. I'm joining ICF. I think in the year that time, I think in 2008. I think 2008, and I heard that our Otto Laske is running a special course through the webinar. No, webinar. At the time we are using the Skype. So I did apply, and I contacted Otto Laske, and I found that there are many things that I need to know. The first thing I feel that quite interesting is when we touch on about the social emotional, whereby it managed to make the difference between social emotional and cognitive development, and seldom heard at the time during my time. And as you know, I was far away in Malaysia here, a few thousand miles. So the weather is not so good sometimes, the Skype line is not so clear. But the subject matter made the whole thing become alive. Because you know, cognitive developments and social emotional, the two things that we cannot be separated, and yet there can be two different strands that tell us a lot of meaning. And the meaning making is the one that's really excited me, especially during the class, whereby I found that to understand one thing, to interpret is another thing, to listen to the structure of the contents, make the whole thing different from what we know about listenings. And the biggest asset that I managed to get is the listening skill, what is meant by developmental listening. So by knowing the listening, by knowing the terms of structure and content, allows us to see the difference between change in time and across time, change across the time. The difference between vertical development and the different different, I call it vertical developments and horizontal development. It tells us about so many things. What would happen if we think so much on the what and we forget to know the how? The whole thing changed. But due to my distance here in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, sometimes the line is not so clear and so what, because what we say is you know the why, you came back anyhow. So I learned to know about this developmental coaching until now. As you know, I started here on my own with the help of Otto visit here in Kuala Lumpur in the year 2012. And with that introduction till now, I'm still continue doing this training, but now it is rather quite difficult in the sense that not so much of to understand what it is, but to make people excited to know what is developmental coaching that really excite me. And the names, as we know, Otto Laske is very popular now in Malaysia, especially on the Asia Pacific region. And lately, as we can see now, developmental coaching make a big introduction here in Kuala Lumpur. By making this happen indirectly, we are saying that what we learn from the West, what we learn from the East, make the whole thing more better and happy. If you happy living and make help to understand even ourselves. So we are talking about emotional and social emotional maturity. We cannot see the difference until we learn what is developmental coaching. That's roughly I want to say now. Aljan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Shaker. Dialectical thinking framework is a second pillar of Otto's work. And dialectical thinking takes very seriously what is not there, that is absences. Otto points out that every concept basically is four-dimensional. It derives its meaning from a context in which it is embedded, from ongoing and emerging changes, which he calls process, from the structural relations and the network of which it is part, and from constant transformation. We already had 4 colleagues from 4 different countries. Let me introduce Gert-Jan de Groot from the Netherlands. Gert-Jan, it's up to you. Gert-Jan?
Yeah, can you hear me? The quote I choose was, what is missing in your view? It's from one of the personal coaching sessions I did with Otto in 2017. I was in his modules and cohorts in 2010 and 2011 in program 1 and program 2. The most difficult part for me was the dialectical thinking, the use of the 28 thought forms. It was a real brain cracker, and we had all kinds of feedback during our sessions with Otto. And I decided that I needed to have a rebound in 2016 and 2017 to work again on dialectical thinking. And what for me was the main insight is that the question was, what is missing? And that you can use this quote to train, to look for thought forms that are missing. So what thought form is not there? What is not in the situation available? And that really helped. I was in a team with different lecturers. And for instance, we all had different opinions and different values and different systems of evaluation of products of students, but we didn't discuss that. So for instance, the thought form 18, how different value systems relate to each other was completely missing in our talk. So that it gave me a lot of insight in that you not only can use it as what is there, but also what is missing. So that is my short introduction. Other ones will follow on dialectical thinking, I think.
Thank you, Gert-Jan. And from the Netherlands, we move on to the United Kingdom. Nick, it's up to you.
Hello, everyone. What a fantastic international gathering this is. quite unbelievable. So my quote is, thinking is realistic to the extent that it's dialectical. I'm not going to say too much about dialectical thinking, but I want to explain a little bit about how Otto has influenced me. And my connection with him began, I think, back in 2006 when I attended a coaching psychology conference in London and listened to a presentation that he gave. Now, at that time, I'd been practicing for a number of years as a consultant in leadership assessment and development, but I was becoming kind of increasingly concerned that my tools and training were simply not up to the job. And what I found was that the people that I interviewed and tried to assess were infinitely more complex than the models and frameworks that I had available to assess them. So the data from those tools was just frequently ambiguous or contradictory. Much that I needed to find out about these people, the tools I had simply couldn't answer. So what I knew was that my psychometric model of my clients was very deficient. What I felt was that my clinical model of the clients that I had was too subjective, but I didn't really know why, and I didn't know what to do about it. So I stumbled into this session at the City University that morning. I think it was in December, and there was Otto talking about adult development. And immediately my ears pricked up, because here was something that was clearly missing from all the assessment literature that I had read, and I was intrigued. And so when Otto announced that he was running a follow-up session that afternoon, I went along, and I saw him demonstrate live his very powerful interview process. So after that session, I knew I was hooked. And a few months later, I enrolled in Gateway, and 2 years on, I completed the final module. So what I learned in those 2 years completely changed my understanding of how to assess and develop organizational managers and leaders. I thought of myself at the time as somebody who was very logical. But from then on, I became fascinated by the idea of dialectical thinking. And I came to realize that the reason my psychometric tools were so deficient was that there was just nothing dialectical about them. They simply viewed personality in terms of linear, bipolar scales, reductive categories, stripped out of any context. And they made no allowance for personal growth or change, let alone transformation. Well, in short, they just were not realistic. So I knew then that if I was to capture the complex reality of the human condition in my assessment work, I couldn't be a purely logical thinker anymore. I had to think dialectically. The big question then, of course, was, well, how do you learn to be a dialectical thinker? Long story short, inspired by Otto's work, the concept of meta-thinking was born. And this is now a book that was being written by Bruno Frischhertz and me, and hopefully will be published next month. And that sets out a set of dialectical thinking tools that people can apply alongside the tools that they would have learned through their education of logical thinking. And in that book, we explain 4 thinking modes that you can see on the slide here. And we show how leaders can transform reality by applying those 4 modes, with reference to Ken Wilber's 4 quadrants of reality. And we talk about 4 case studies of transformation: individual, team, organization, and national level, and provide 28 exercises to help people learn how they can transform their thinking. Now, without Otto and his wonderful scholarship and teaching, that work would just not have been possible for me. So thank you very much, Otto, and thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you, Nick. And well, we were in the same cohort, and I can certainly advise you to buy the book of meta thinking, because I learned to appreciate Nick very much in his both original but truthful way in which he thinks through how to apply Otto's work. So I Haven't read your contribution, but I'm convinced that it will be very much worthwhile to read. Thank you. And from the UK, we move on to the United States. Eva, it's up to you. Eva.
Hello, hi, I'm Eva Gordelia. Greetings from Chicago. It's a great privilege to be here today to honor our teacher and mentor and our friend, Otto Laske. I'm one of his early students, and out of Otto's extensive teaching repertoire of constructive developmental framework, I was mostly impacted by studying dialectical thinking and learning how to work with the dialectical thought form framework. Otto's teaching is powerful, and his quotes change lives. One of his quotes profoundly influenced my awareness about the thinking action, the concept of a spectator view of knowledge, and moving concepts around one's mental space like pieces of furniture. And here is why I selected this quote. In 2008, I was professionally engaged in change management consulting while also pursuing a PhD in leadership and change. I was developing reflective inquiry skills, exploring adult development theory, and studying phenomenology for my dissertation work. I was absorbing fascinating new ideas, yet remained unaware of my own reductionist view of the field. Life felt good. I was busy but content. And then Otto came into my life and turned it upside down. In his lectures and writings, Otto often uses the phrase moving concepts around like pieces of furniture, illustrating the epistemic stance that reduces knowledge to information. It simply means that when we treat concepts like fixed entities and treat them as real, and then move them around without further scrutiny, we are not really thinking. This quote enabled me to recognize the depth of deception when failing to engage in real thinking. I was disheartened when I faced with the limits of my own thought process, but became determined to find the way to remedy it. My working conditions remained the same, but my inner landscape changed dramatically. As Otto says, when you're aware of the limits of your thinking, you have already transcended them. Moving away from spectators' view of knowledge and stop taking concepts for granted was not easy. It required patience and discipline. Otto's work inspired me to never stop seeking deeper truth and taught me how to negotiate the risks of engaging in the critically reflective process. Since transitioning into university teaching and leadership coaching, I found out that most of my students and coachees have never heard about adult development, not even systemic thinking. And after a brief introduction into these fields of knowledge, they become fascinated by the prospect of growing their capabilities, not only competencies. In working with them, I learned how powerful it is to point out the limitations of their own thinking in real time and make them aware of the method to transcend those limitations. Then after the initial shock of discovery, they quickly become eager to learn more. This is where my work begins, in the space between linear and systemic thinking, hoping to shift their stance toward cognitive development, one person at a time. So becoming a dialectical thinker is a lifelong pursuit. The metaphor of moving pieces of furniture around one mental space is significant. It helps us unfreeze or uncover our old habitual thinking and the first step to building a pathway toward more complex cognitive structures. It is only when we abandon the spectacular view of knowledge we can understand what constitutes good thinking and appreciate the power of dialectical thought form to transcend formal logic. And let me end with the opening line from the movie Forrest Gump. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. By the privilege of learning from Otto, I feel that life rewarded me not only with a delectable surprise, but with a lavish dessert, much like the one Otto, Nadine, and I shared when we saw each other last year. Otto, thank you.
Thank you,
and
Eva.
Thank you all.
And thank you for your wonderful testimonial. We proceed our journey to Chile. Paul, it's your turn.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation too. Well, my name is Paul Inventor, and I will speak on behalf of HCN World and Academia Impact students, being myself one of them. So first, to start our gratitude to Otto. we'd like to talk about what Otto has given us. His contribution was far beyond we could imagine and covered almost everything in our lives because we came in the long path of better thinking. Not easy. I met Otto in 2009, and since then, I was his student. And afterward, we were lucky to have him here in Chile teaching our students. For many years, the first impression with Otto's teaching was really overwhelming. And you can love it in my perspective, or you don't get it. But if you were among the ones who were listening carefully, you find a new way of living how you perceive reality. And to understand his teachings, well, I don't know if Otto is going to like this comparison, but to me, and sorry, Otto, your teaching sometimes are like listen to some Mahler's symphony, because you have to listen carefully a couple of times, because something inside says there's an enormous value behind. So you start finding out more and more, and it's an ongoing and enjoyable process. I never told that also to Otto, but our students here in Chile, very much attached to Hollywood movies, they call him Yoda, mainly because of his kindness, his wise way of being, and the love to deliver his teachings. And learning from his vision and understanding of the world that goes beyond what we imagine has been quite a challenge, because we have seen an enormous change in the cognitive and emotional understanding of our coaching students, mainly because they are better listeners, much better listeners, as well as more compassionate. Or it was not easy for them to follow Otto's teachings. That's our reality too. When we face the first, and step by step, they started to better differentiate context, process, relations, and for sure, the overall transformation. Incorporating those teachings in simple words, well, they started to be better coaches and to do better coaching sessions and to increase the number of possibilities available on their overall professional and personal life decisions. They found out how they can better understand their lives and the world we live in. You know, not easy again. And what I saw that happened, well, during these almost 10 years, I've seen how Otto, with kindness, has been devoted to transmitting his work for all of us. And I hope you, Otto, you should be confident that you have given us a great treasure as a legacy. So thank you very much for all the lessons and teachings, dear Otto. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. In the meantime, I saw one question passing through the chat, and that was a question, will you share the recording and the presentation? I can't do that through Eventbrite, but I will do it through LinkedIn tomorrow with the post. So everybody will be able to download the materials. You'll find the WeTransfer link in a LinkedIn post that I will post tomorrow morning. Let's go back to the United States. Bernardo, it's up to you.
Thank you, Jan, and hello, Otto. Thank you very much.
Lewat 30 minutes already gone.
Yeah, can you put your mic on?
Can people please mute their microphones?
Yeah, Bernardo?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jan, and hello, Otto. Thank you for creating this incredible framework for all of us meeting from around the world. I met Otto a number of years ago when I had started with a developmental process in psychotherapy, and I found serendipitously, as usually happens, and have been impacted tremendously. And one of the things that was most attractive is the beauty with which he writes, the clarity with he writes about these so complex topics and put them in these wonderful volumes, which are really manuals that are going to be lasting for decades for sure. And beyond the extraordinary work that Otto has done in integrating these various components of constructive developmental theories from various sources, blending them together, modifying them for greater comprehension and application, and providing us with these tools, it is important to highlight the emotional elements within the model. The process of identifying and defining people's meaning making and sense making happens within the context of being human. And that entails not just an intellectual framework of our epistemic and socio-emotional stage, but the real experience of the emotional import of the material. By engaging in this process, we are made aware where we are in our journey of unfolding into who we can be, and we must be challenged along the way if we want to go farther. We come face to face with what may be hampering our advance along our path to manifest all capabilities and capacities that we have to the greatest degree possible. For that, we learn about our constraints and probable energy sinks so we can address them. That is why active coaching or psychotherapy, as the case may be, is very important, because there will be time we need someone to assist us with holding the scaffold and showing us where to set the next footing. That we have this wonderful design diagnostic tool, if we can call it that, doesn't mean the work to be done is easy. As we could say, the surgery may go well, but we still have to recover from the procedure. There may be past traumas or frustrations, doubts and uncertainties we will need to address. There will be ossified constructs and concepts that were created earlier in our lives that we may need to revisit, to reframe them, to modify them, to release them or integrate them into a different, healthier schema. Along the way, we need endurance and perseverance, as well as to understand the reason for doing it, to identify the motivation behind it, the why. That ability to reflect and put into action what we need to do to advance our development is what the constructive developmental framework, as envisioned by Otto and taught by the IDM, has to offer. It is a compass to find our location in the map and a road to follow. Thank you, Otto, for all the incredible things that you have offered us, and we're here to thank you tremendously from our hearts. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Bernardo. Brendan from Australia is next, but he informed me this afternoon that he has a specific meeting tomorrow morning, which he could not say no to. So it's 2 a.m. in the morning in Australia. And he sent me a text with a question that I would be able to read it together with his slide. So he wants to pay his gratitude and respect to Otto and for the significant contribution Otto made to his personal development. And I'm reading his text. Otto was the right teacher for me at the right time. And I discovered IDM through Integral and Meta-Integral Institute and was immediately enabled to better transition from multi-perspectivity to dialectical frameworks and fine-tune my understanding of interdevelopmental transformation. Gratefully, this occurred just when I was transitioning vocationally from technical writing to executive coaching. It was a delight to get to know the very patient and caring person that Otto is and to become guided by his thorough pedagogy. I quickly became enthusiastic about IDM's ideas and willingly began the training sessions, which started at 4 a.m. in the morning. It was inspiring for me to connect up with so many astute IDM professionals around the world. And to this day, many are still my friends and close and collaborative colleagues. Of course, IDM still remains groundbreaking and seminal work empowering projects in practical philosophy in the post-Frankfurt School fashion. As some of you know, IDM and Otto continue to have a huge and positive impact on my personal and my professional life. I'm currently undertaking doctoral research at Swinburne University here in Melbourne, Australia. And the research project attempts to extend interdevelopmental assessments into executive explanatory critiques. Otto's ability to integrate interdevelopmental ideas into Bhaskare's dialectical critical realism, as it underlabors remediating structure and agency application, is truly transformative of executive practice. IDM's vision is still yet to have full impact in corporate life around the globe, but I have no doubt it will inevitably will. IDM's strength is it is grounded in clients establishing their thoughts as empirical findings. Their thoughts become transparent objects to them, and when they see how these thoughts relate, they can see possibilities for transformation of their corporate roles and corporations and themselves, not as speculations, but as grounded actualities. Thinking becomes, in that sense, practical. And the most important skill I acquired from IDM is to listen developmentally to my clients. It is with keen fascination that I hear every day my clients telling me how they see their world constructed developmentally, and being able to see our epistemic positions play out in our professional houses, the self, first order and second order houses, is a very profound insight. I reflected with deep gratitude on all the IDM materials as I scanned them once again before writing these few paragraphs. May all of you able to be online gain a lot when reflecting on the international impact that IDM and Otto have achieved. And congratulations, Otto, on this very fine 20-year achievement, and I hope you can enjoy these online celebrations. Party hard. Thank you very much to all concerned for undertaking the initiative to instigate this IDM Tribute and Linker project. So that was the letter Brendan gave to me. Now we'll move on to process consultation, and looking at the time, I will skip my introduction to process consultation and immediately give the floor to Lorraine. Lorraine, are you there?
Lorraine? Yes, I am. I am. I'm just going, I'm sorry, I had to get off mute. I should have known that. Okay.
No problem.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jen, for arranging this. And also thank you, Otto. I have to say that having this opportunity to do this presentation today has been a real gift for me to be able to renew, I can say, my deep appreciation for what Otto has given to me. And I would say also to others with whom I have journeyed, both in my professional as well as my personal. So I'm really pleased to be able to do this today. I'll begin by saying that first, I have never met Otto in person. I've always met Otto actually in the early days. We didn't do video. We actually did just voice. So those of you, I know that Nick spoke about it. I know that Jean is here. But in those days, we were on the telephone listening to these sessions that we had in the Gateway. So it's kind of nice now to be able to, and I have to say, a little envious of those who had the opportunity to work directly with Otto in person. So I first encountered Otto actually in doing a book review on his first volume on Hidden Dimensions, going back actually to 2006. I got that book review from Resource Network for Mentoring here in Canada, and I think it actually was his first version of that book. I was taken by it because I had just finished my own doctoral studies in which I had used the work of Robert Keegan And I was really interested to see how Otto would have integrated or engaged with that work. And of course, I was quite blown away at the time when I did read it. And as others have said, I was hooked in. As a practical theologian and professor in leadership development, I was, and I still am, drawn to figuring out what kind of learning processes lead to practical wisdom. And Otto's work actually helped me to define what I even meant by practical wisdom when it does come to the cognitive fluidity that that requires. So my learning journey with Otto began shortly after the book review. So I actually did work and learn with Otto between 2007 to 2009. So it kind of goes with some other numbers that we have here. And I need to say it continues to shape my practice of what I say is accompanying others in their, sorry about that, of accompanying others in individuals and organizations in their own becoming. So like we have heard from the testimonials so far, I need to say that Otto, certainly for me, is a real wizard at connecting and operationalizing very complex frameworks to make them more accessible to practitioners for incorporating into our own developmental processes. So the quote that I've taken, there is a direct connection between how we think and what we do. As all of us, this phrase I first encountered with Otto, and for me, I saw that it was really much at the heart of my work now as an educator and facilitator of change. This very small maxim actually is the premise on which I invite students to take a risk, to explore their own ways of knowing, their own ways of thinking, and their relationship to them as it affects, as it impacts on their practices. And so his pyramid of human capabilities has helped me to put an emphasis then on the development in my instructional design, recognizing the importance on focusing then on the capabilities, the cognitive, the social and emotional capabilities in the accompaniment that I offer. And the clarity that Otto has brought to the developmental phases of thinking has given me a framework for meeting students where they're at and for scaffolding their development. I also want to say is that it's quite appropriate that my contribution actually falls under that theme of process consultation when I understand it as a helping relationship that acknowledges that we can only help a human system to help itself. Since my work with Otto, I've appreciated my own role as an educator through the lens more of a process developmental consultant or in consultation. Process consultation, as we know, relies on a trusting and generative relationship between consultant and client for a change to happen. And as Otto has stressed then, for the accompaniment to truly be developmental, not only does that quality depend on strong interpersonal skills, but also on the shape of that mental space in which both the consultant and the client meet. And for Otto, of course, he has raised that mental space, then if it is to serve the client's own development, then the consultant, as we see even in that diagram that Jan has put out, the consultant then has to be at a higher developmental level in order to actually even leverage the client's ability to change. This actually has shaped my own strategies for accompanying those who seek sustainable change for themselves and for their organizations. It's also helped me to guide students in choosing their own on-site mentors who demonstrate that they themselves have an inner space that they're capable of accompanying them without opposing their own egos and their own certitudes for knowledge and truth. So the emphasis then I put on developmental mentoring is very much informed then by Otto's conceptual frameworks and tools. And I just want to finish by saying this tribute actually is timely in terms of my current teaching in a new certificate program for professionals who accompany newcomers in navigating healthcare and social services across Canada. My role is to accompany them in developing their skills for a reflective practice that aims at bettering the newcomer experience. And the saying I have chosen for this tribute actually is a key premise for grounding their own processes, for reflecting on the strengths and limits of their own systems of knowing that underlie their practices. So Otto's work has been instrumental for creating my own conceptual frameworks for reflective practice that aims at developing practical wisdom. And I understand practical wisdom then, that's about developing capabilities for doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And as I reflected on that, I allowed myself also to say then that I do believe that such practical wisdom is a capability that this world actually sorely needs at this time. And so thank you, Otto. It's been a real privilege to be able to work with you and also to continue with engage with your wonderful theories and concepts.
Thank you, Lorraine. Let's immediately move on. Bernard from Austria. It's up to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jan, for bringing us all together. And please give me a sign if I speak too long. When I came across the 28 thought forms years ago by reading, I had been trying to put together some kind of thought patterns until then before, but I was not very satisfied with what I came up. And so when I found this treasure, I was really fascinated. And it inspired me to put together all different kinds of patterns after that. And so my first gratitude to you, Otto, is for making me aware and bringing to me this precious gift of the 28 thought forms. And in hindsight, I realized that I was like a missionary, preaching, lecturing, but maybe not so helpful. And so my second gratitude to you, Otto, is that you brought to my awareness the importance of dialogue, and that patterns are maybe helpful to listen, but the dialogue is the real powerful tool or weapon or whatever you call, which metaphor you might use. And the dialogue not just between people, but also between the different parts of voices, or whatever we call this, that we have within ourselves and that our clients and our partners have in their minds and in their hearts. So this is where I'm trying to focus now for the next time and years, the power of mind-opening dialogue. Thank you very much, Otto. Thank you very much, Jan.
Thank you, Bernard. Daniel from Spain.
Hello, Jan. How are you? Thank you very much for organizing this tribute to Otto. And hello to all. It's a pleasure to hear all of you and to know more about all of you. And of course, Otto, thank you very much for being there, for being a master for all of us. And my real gratitude for what you have meant to me and you mean now still as a master. I think a lot about you. When I thought about highlighting something in these 4 minutes, I have selected one important thing for my profession, which is listening. So this phrase is about that, and this is like a prayer for me. This has been like a prayer for me, and for many others that I have taught throughout all these years, since 2009, I think. The fundamental question of developmental listening is how clients' wishes are generated based on their frame of reference. I know this is not new for you, but I know that it is good to remind it, that the wishes transmitted are only content and cannot serve as a guide for the understanding of the clients, except very superficially. If you think about the impact of this in the usual way of coaching, you can imagine what many of my students could learn thanks to Otto. They learned that what is required is to understand the meaning generator that prompts clients to their desires. This was like something, tell me more, something like, what is behind this? And this led to give the structure in which you can have confidence, you can trust in the structure that Otto gave us through the social, mainly through the social emotional dimension, the stages of the social emotional development. And coaches, thanks to that, can listen really deeply for coaching, this is very important because the transformation of the people depends directly in our listening. So the use I gave to the way of listening of Otto is not diagnosis, which is the usual way the interviews that Otto teaches us, but for coaching, which is listening not in order to see the stage only, but in order to help them, to motivate them to get to the most developed way of thinking. So we saw we go further, and we made a research about that. And so we take 21 interviews, 21 valid interviews, which we recorded and transcribed to analyze what was the language that we can see at the beginning of the coaching session, and how is the text, how is the language, how are the phrases of these people that we are coaching at the end of the coaching session, using the listening, the type of listening that Otto teaches us, and at the same time doing a visualization. And the result is that I analyzed the language at the beginning of the session and at the end of the session, in the second half of the session, and I could see that in every session of the 21 sessions, we could find that the cognitive level of the thinking of the person, which we can see through the text, through the analyzing the text, have shifted to a higher level. So through listening, through this kind of listening that we can make in developmental, through the developmental stages, we can help people to not only analyze and diagnose them, but to help them to get further. And just one final word, which I could find also in Otto, and not many times we can reflect on that, although I have heard it today, which is the word compassion. When Otto is doing their interviews, you can see compassion, you can see empathy, you can see all the humanity, all his humanity. And that is something that I also learned from him. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel, for this beautiful testimonial. Graham, are you there?
I am here. Thank you very much, Jan. And also thank you enormously to Otto. It's been a delight for me here listening to everybody else speaking, because every speaker, there has been a reaction in me of thinking, ah, yes, that's part of what I've been doing for the past 12 years. And it's become so obvious and natural that I don't even think about it anymore. So the quote there really struck me. You cannot coach someone more developed than you are. And that immediately connected with the complementary statement of you cannot manage somebody who's more developed than you are. I first came across Otto's work around 2007, 2008 through Rainer here in Brussels. At the point I was leaving Procter & Gamble, recognizing that the growing climate emergency and all of the other challenges that the world was facing required us to do things far bigger and far faster than I had any expectation that I would be able to do inside P&G. And Otto's work, the whole constructivist developmental framework, has been a core part of what I've been doing ever since then. The essence of that for me, the statement is, if you're inside a box you can't see what's outside the box, and you may not even be able to see the box that you're in. And that led me to recognize a couple of things. One of them was, it wasn't enough to just do a single approach like developmental practices or sociocracy or any of those. You needed to integrate them together in a one-stop solution. The other thing that led me to recognize is that if we incorporate companies buying into the myth that the company is a thing that you can own, that cascades down into all of the people inside the company, that this myth becomes part of their meaning making. If the company is a property of an investor, I'm also a property of an investor. And this has a very serious consequence for everything that we're doing, which is that their psychological safety in organizations is extremely fragile, subject to the benevolence of whoever shows up as owner. And whether that is actually true or not, it's part of the meaning making of everybody at some deep level that they are seldom aware of. So that opened up for me the big question of, if we're going to transform the institution of business, our global economy, as we need to do to rise to the adaptive challenge we're facing, we cannot do it if we are still inside the box of today's incorporation. So that led me to develop a hack of the standard limited company, which I've called the Fair Shares Commons, which is designed to create a company that is not only absent of concepts of property, but is free itself to be explicitly a meaning-making being. So that's what I'm very much up to, taking really seriously also what this all means, and the fact that we create our experienced reality internally has led to a collaboration which is in this book that I'm busy writing. The new title is Rebuild, The Economy, Leadership and You. Jack Reardon is an economist, and one of the things we're working on is, what does economics become if you take really seriously the idea that every single human being on the planet is experiencing their own internally unique reality? What does that mean for rational decision-making in economics? Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I had the opportunity to read already certain parts of your book, and I must admit it's really an exquisite integration of Otto's work into building a picture on how the future organization could look like. So I can certainly recommend the book for everyone participating here today. It's my turn now to make a testimonial, and I will keep it a bit short because we are running out of time. I personally met Otto in 2005, and he was giving a workshop in Brussels, and I arrived just before the morning break. So I missed his introduction, and I was immediately confronted with a different kind of open questions he asked in a very humble but challenging way to the group. And I found there was something interesting and very intriguing about these open questions. They followed naturally from the remarks and the opinions participants brought forward. And yet there was something different about them. He explained that the questions were derived from thought forms. And it took me a while to understand what he meant by this. It was by making an analogy with visual arts that I started to realize that what was absent resembled what is defined as negative space in painting. In the art, the negative space is the space around and between subjects of an image that define the image, such as in the picture of the chair being defined by the edges. In many organizational issues, negative space consists of the bigger picture, emerging changes, essential structural relationships and the potential of human agency. And there are aspects of reality we usually do not include in the understanding of situations from our logical, analytical perspective. And they play in the background. And because they are not included in our problem handling, fragmentation in the solution occurs. Over the last years, I had the opportunity to work with Otto, shifting the focus to the topic of collaborative intelligence and how developmental diversity in teams influences the quality of team dialogue. Our 2 books on dynamic collaboration are paving the way to integrate the constructive developmental framework into everyday organizational practices, and thus building a new type of organization. Otto inspired me to create practical tools like the rethinking game or the landscape of identity questions to open the reflexive space and the dialogue on social emotional themes. At this moment, the process toolkits start getting used in 6 organizations. And I also created a breakthrough in building a digital application based on Otto Suite. The development, which was a co-creation process with clients, gave us many headaches. But finally, recent insights into semantic intelligence helped us to create an application that gets very close to a person's sense and meaning making. The application is launched last April and is already in use in 9 companies. I want to thank Otto profoundly for this. It's thanks to Otto that my consultancy practice in organizational design and development flourishes. So this was my testimonial, and we were planning to have a brief exchange on the future of IDF, CDF and IDM. And perhaps, Rainer, you can share something on the Center of Applied Dialectics. Rainer? Rainer must be on the train and lost the connection. Perhaps, Graham, can you tell a bit more about the Fair Share Commons initiative and how really CDF fits in that?
Gladly. Please guide me on time because I can talk about this for days.
Well, 3 minutes.
3
Would
minutes.
that be sufficient?
Perfect, perfect. So it integrates together in that I look at organizations as having 3 dimensions. One dimension is the human, one dimension is the roles and tasks, and the third dimension is the legal incorporation. And on each dimension, we've developed a scale that goes from 0 to 5. So if an organization has development as a core purpose, in other words, all of CDF is fully integrated into how people interact with each other, it would score 5 on the developmental human dimension. If the organization has autopoiesis, in other words, it's self-poetry, it's self-generating, it would score 5 on that dimension. For both of those level 5s to be achievable, you cannot do it if you incorporate with a standard limited company in any way that is anti-fragile. It will be fragile. I don't think you can even get psychological safety with a standard limited company in any way except for the benevolence of the owner's short period. But they could pass away, their children inherit, and the psychological safety goes out the window. So the Fair Shares Commons, it integrates all of Eleanor Ostrom's understanding of what makes a highly functional commons with an understanding of CDF, but now CDF really applied to the whole organization, and looking at the organization itself very much as a complex open system that has some kind of a collective meaning-making capacity, which is what you might call the culture. And so the Fair Shares Commons then has built into it the freedom that we as normal human beings enjoy. And it has that freedom by making sure that there's a balance of power inside the whole company of all of the stakeholders, not just the investors. So voting rights are now shared across all stakeholders involved in the company, and benefit from wealth share and things like that, again, is distributed across all stakeholders, not just the investors. And that enables the company to truly become a responsible, accountable part of the global economy, rather than at the moment, companies are primarily just tools of the investors because the structure enables them to act as if they own the company. That's probably 5 minutes, but I will stop there. You're on mute, Jan.
Thank you, Graham. We're almost at the end of this session, and I would like at this moment give the word to Otto. Otto, it's up to you. And can I ask to mute microphones, please? Otto.
Thank you, Jan.
Sorry, John, you can mute everybody's button, John. If you go to the control participants, you can mute everybody.
With this, how can I do this?
If you go to participants and you click the little arrow, you'll see there mute all, and then you can choose who you can turn on.
Okay. Mute all.
Yep.
Yes, and now unmute Otto, just a moment.
Yes, I am unmuted.
Okay.
And I want to thank you. I'm, of course, quite overwhelmed by the many experiences that have been shared here with the framework that I put together 20 years ago and have taught and am still teaching today. And I don't really know how to thank you all except by sharing a few thoughts here for which I have time. This is surely a unique moment in the history of IDM, the IDM community, a moment I and many of you have hoped would occur for a long time. What makes this moment special is that CDF, the Constructive Development Framework, has finally emerged, not only as a theoretical, but as a practical framework for consulting to clients' mental process from an adult developmental vantage point. A developmentally mature form of what Schein has called process consultation. To stay in the moment, let me say I feel a little bit like a boy who has been shown that the tools he built for himself effectively work for other children. In the case of CDF, these tools are process consultation tools that have their origin in the art of developmental interviewing for assessment. I don't think that the adult developmental research community really understood the power of structured interviewing as a dialogue. The fact that social, emotional, and cognitive interviewing are an optimal consultation tool, not only for work in organizations, but in political, educational, and societal dialogue spaces. In a time of algorithmic policing and political demagoguery, developmental process consultation is called for more than ever. When I began to learn about adult developmental research in 1992 through Keegan, I brought to it my schooling in dialectical thinking from the Frankfurt School. I realized the crucial relevance of connecting what logical thinking can only separate. I felt compelled early on to make some critical distinctions not sufficiently emphasized before me, those between social, emotional, and cognitive, meaning-making and sense-making, horizontal and vertical, interviewing and assessment, and particularly monological versus dialogical. And everything on the page is monological. I defined novel terms to provide the how for Kohlberg's, Levenger's, Keegan's, Wilber's, Bassage's, Jacques, Shine's, and even Bascar's what, whereby how I mean the question, how does this work in real time? Here are three main insights that make CDF tick, in my view. The insight that people function and operate in real time based on developmental structures discernible through listening that can be brought to their attention for the sake of raising self-awareness and help stretch accountability level. Second, the insight that these structures in CDF referred to as social, emotional, cognitive, and psychological make sense only in relationship to each other, not separated from each other, both in research and consulting. And third, the insight that an adult developmental perspective offers criteria by means of which any community, organizational, educational, or religious, can ask itself critical questions about the limits of its own functioning and goal pursuit. To update you on my work, here is a concrete offer for learning CDF tools through the experience of structured interviewing. As I have done since 2001, I teach small 5 to 6 member cohorts learning to work in CDF through empirical case studies over 8 to 9 months, now in Zoom sessions. I have scheduled a Zoom session, information session on such a study for next Monday, September 21st at 2 p.m., to which I can send you a link if you send me an email. I'm also open to holding individual information sessions on such study. To close, I wish to congratulate especially those who have spoken today for their passion and ingenuity in making CDF their own within a broad variety of work contexts. I am moved by and will continue to be connected to your diverse academic, organizational, and institutional initiatives meant to help people become more self-aware of the ways in which they presently make meaning and sense of their world. I fervently wish that from now on, we can gather more frequently to make our work with CDF known to others who can benefit from it. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Otto. Thank you for this this closing words. I would like to thank every colleague that participated, shared his experience, her experience with your work. I found it a very rewarding session today. And again, thank you in name of everyone. You forgot to mention your email address, Otto, which is otto@interdevelopmentals.org for those who want to contact you or to send you a signal. I will mention your email address also tomorrow in the LinkedIn post, where you will find a link to a WeTransfer, so that you can download both the recording of the session and the slides used. So I wish everybody a very nice evening or remaining of the day. And well, I hope to meet all of you in real life once. And I hope it won't take long that we can make that possible. So again, thank you everyone. And well, till later. Bye.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Thank you, Otto.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
What a great gathering.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Great.
Be well. Be all of you.
Thank you.
Well.
Thank you.
You, Otto.